Carol.
Welcome, everyone. We'll begin in just a minute as everyone comes on here. Welcome. It is a joy to welcome you to Temple Beth El for this important panel today. We read in the Talmud, in Tractate Brachot, that it is really essential that the community be consulted before something is built, that the voice of the community is essential in building something holy. And so it's with that in our hearts that we offer this opportunity to reflect upon building in our own great state of Rhode Island as we enthusiastically participate in the electoral process available to us. We are grateful to partner today with our friends at the United Way, at the Jewish Alliance, and with the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty. And it is with great gratitude that I now introduce Courtney Nicolato. For the last 2.5 years, Courtney has been the president and CEO of the United Way of Rhode Island and brings decades of experience along with her. We are fortunate that she has brought her incredible spirit and vision to our state. As a URI grad and trustee, Courtney brings this additional layer to the conversation, and I'm proud to say that Courtney and her husband David and their sons Jacob and Ian are beloved members of our Temple Beth El family. So it's with that in our hearts that I now turn it over to Courtney to introduce our panel.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks everybody for being here. One of the aspects that I love about Temple Beth El is our commitment to justice, our commitment to social justice, to really raising the importance of understanding that our voice matters. And this is just a perfect example of where your voice and your opinion and your perspective matters. So I am thrilled to be here and grateful for Rabbi Mack and Temple Beth El, as well as the Jewish Alliance and the Interfaith Coalition for supporting this important conversation. And I'm more than thrilled to have such great leaders with us today to talk about a handful of the questions. Before we go into that, I want to share a little bit about the questions, all of them, because we're not going to have time today to talk about all 7 questions on the March 2nd election, but I do want to highlight a little bit about the 7 bond questions. So you will hear about questions 1, 3, and 5 today. So the first question, which will be number 1, and our President Frank Sanchez is here and he'll be sharing in a second, is about repairs and reconstruction of 3 buildings, one at URI, one at CCRI, and one at RIC. This is a total of $107.3 million for higher education. Number 2 is about beach, clean water, and green. It is a total of $74 million. This question includes $33 million for capital improvements to state beaches, parks, campgrounds, including Goddard State Park, Roger Wheeler State Beach, one of our family favorites, Scarborough, Mesquamaket, and many more. $4 million for the 195 infrastructure development, $4 million for matching grants. And you'll see in a lot of aspects of these bond referendums, matching grants. So with these additional funds, we're able to scale even deeper. And so $50 million for wastewater collection and treatment, $2 million for the Woonasquatucket River watershed infrastructure, which I can tell you has done incredible work. We're a proud partner of the Woonasquatucket River watershed at United Way, as our building literally sits right on the Woonasquatucket River. Number 3, which you'll hear from Kyle Bennett today, is around housing. This is $65 million for the support of affordable housing and redevelopment of existing structures in the state. And Kyle will give you a myriad as to reasons why $65 million is incredibly important for our state. Number 4 is around transportation. $71.7 million to be used for a federal fund matching requirement to improve our infrastructure, including our ports, highways, roads, and bridges. You will hear lots about number 5 today from Elizabeth Burke Bryant. This is around early childhood care and education fund, $15 million for physical improvements to and the development of licensed early childhood care and education facilities. Number 6 on your bond referendum is around cultural arts and economy grant program. This is $7 million. This includes support to Trinity Repertory Company, Rhode Island Philharmonic, the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, and many of these as well is a matching grant to support the infrastructure and growth of those organizations. And then last but not least is the industrial facilities infrastructure. This is $60 million bond. Of the $60 million that is proposed, $40 million of it will go to industrial site development and infrastructure at Quonset. If you've been to Quonset, you've probably seen they are bursting at the seams. And so growing Quonset and continuing to be an economic driver for our state. $20 million of it goes specifically to the Port of Davisville at Quonset, and pay for a new pier at Terminal 5, renovate Pier 1, and dredge the Quonset port. So an eclectic group of bonds, but I wanted to provide some context at the beginning as to all 7 bonds. But today we're going to talk about 3 in particular, because as you could see, we could spend all day talking about all 7. And don't worry, you're going to hear commercials and social media ads and all kinds of stuff on all 7 between now and March 2nd. But we're going to highlight 3 in particular. Let's start with question 1. Question 1 is around higher education. I'm pleased to have Dr. Frank Sanchez here. Dr. Sanchez, President Sanchez, he sits on my board. So if I say Frank, my apologies.
Frank is fine.
Okay. He's the 10th president of Rhode Island College. And was installed on July 1st, 2016. Before that, he was Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at the City University of New York, which is now the largest urban public university, serving over 500,000 students in New York City. He has provided system-wide leadership in coordination, delivery, and evaluation, and is a fierce, and I can attest, fierce advocate for not only students, but for our community members. And building racial equity and opportunities through his work serving on the United Way board. He's a native of Cheyenne, Wyoming, and holds a PhD in higher ed and with a concentration on learning, cognition, and instruction from Indiana University, Bloomington. We're thrilled to have Frank here. Frank is going to share a little bit, and he's representing RIC, URI, and CCRI. So big task, but an important one. So Frank, share a little bit about question number 1, what question number 1 entails, and why it's important to Rhode Island.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much, Courtney. And I also want to take a moment to thank certainly Temple Beth El, the Jewish Alliance of Greater Rhode Island, and the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition for your sponsorship of what I think is a very, very important conversation on this special election and bond measure. So question number 1, as Courtney mentioned, if approved, it would provide $107.3 million in capital investments for higher ed. And that would impact all 3 public higher education institutions in the state. A little bit on each one. For the University of Rhode Island, it would support the Fine Arts Center, providing about $57.3 million to design, renovate, and construct a new facility and the infrastructure for the Fine Arts Center on the Kingston campus. Some of you may have had the chance to be in that facility. The Fine Arts Center at URI supports over 5,000 students. I think annually it hosts more than 50,000 visitors. The bond would construct the central academic building, that would provide the classroom and laboratory spaces to essentially deliver hundreds of courses to students. And when it's completed, the entire fine arts complex would continue to be an important asset to the state in attracting talent, providing rich cultural and artistic experiences, and I think the primary mission, educating future design, performing artists and entrepreneurs, and contributing to the very, very important creative economy across the state. So that's the URI piece. For Rhode Island College, this bond, if approved, would support about $38 million to completely renovate and expand our Clark Science building. And that is our primary science building. You know, it was built in 1962. There's not been any major renovation for about the 59 years it's been in existence. It also hosts hundreds of classes that are taught in the building. Nearly every single RIC student who passes through the halls of Clark Science is touched, whether it's a major in one of our physical sciences, many of them are fulfilling their general education requirements, or they're taking courses to supplement their environmental studies, medical imaging, health education, and nursing. In fact, this past year, 2,600 students took advantage of that building on courses of chemistry, physics, astronomy, physical sciences. I could go on and on. The renovation would modernize approximately 4,300 or 1,000 square feet and add an additional 60,000 square feet onto the building. And so that's a little bit about the Rhode Island College impact. For the Community College Rhode Island, this bond would support $12 million to provide funding to, once again, design and renovate the student support services and classroom spaces, both on the Knight and Flanagan campuses. And in the end, this funding would address deferred maintenance and would improve accessibility and the functionality of those buildings. You know, CCRI has done some great work. This past year, they completed a college-wide master's facilities plan, and it identified several areas of work. Specifically, this bond would go towards transforming how they serve our students on both the Knight and Flanagan campuses, with the construction with a one-stop shop services there, providing admissions, advising, financial aid, disability services. They want to enhance the Knight campus with the construction of an additional elevator there and improve pedestrian traffic flow on the ground and first levels. And then the third major piece of their area of work will be to renovate classrooms and labs, both at the Flanagan and Liston campuses, to support collaborative learning and equip the college with critical technology upgrades. You know, the last part I'll say about why this is so important for Rhode Island, you know, this bond in essence is going to help all of our public higher education institutions redesign and modernize our facilities to provide state-of-the-art spaces and training. And in the end, when you're able to provide the type of high quality spaces that this bond proposed, you're in a better position to meet the demands of today's economy and help move Rhode Island forward. You know, in today's economy, and there's a lot of research on this, most higher wage jobs require a degree or a certificate. And if we're going to prepare Rhode Island students for these jobs in areas like science, technology, visual and graphic arts, we must invest in our public higher education institutions. And then lastly, you know, in many ways, these bonds are Rhode Island's own stimulus. This is an opportunity to put Rhode Islanders back to work. And I think it's a great way not only to put Rhode Islanders back to work, but to advance and enhance our higher education institutions across the state.
Thank you.
Courtney.
No, thank you, President Sanchez. And if you have a question throughout, we're going to do some initial introductory comments about the bonds, but if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Both Rabbi Mack and I will be monitoring questions, and after each of our panelists have shared their thoughts around their respective bond questions, we'll make sure that we have time for some Q&A. So thank you in advance for doing that. I am thrilled to introduce Kyle Bennett. Kyle is the Director of Policy and Equity at the United Way of Rhode Island. Kyle is a native of Brooklyn, grew up in Providence, and has devoted his personal and professional life to lending his time and talents and treasures in service to the Rhode Island community. I will tell you, and I think every single one of our panelists can also attest, Kyle is everywhere serving Rhode Island. He attended North Carolina A&T State and Rhode Island College, where he studied secondary education and mathematics. Kyle is married to an absolutely lovely woman, Anita Bennett, a corporate paralegal at Hinckley Allen. He's the proud father of a beautiful daughter who is a graduate of the University of Rhode Island and works at Diversity Talks. He currently serves as Director of Public Policy and Equity. In this role, Kyle manages a team as unbelievably serving to the community as he is, focused on defining challenges for our community and moving equitable policy that addresses the unmet need for an acute focus on our Black, Indigenous, and people of color community. He is focused, that is an understatement, underline, bold, highlight, do whatever you want to do, on creating systems that serve the greater good for Rhode Islanders. He is Rhode Island, in my opinion, one of their biggest cheerleaders and one of housing's biggest cheerleaders. And so, Kyle, I'm thrilled that you're here sharing a little bit about question 3 and why housing is so important to everyone in Rhode Island.
Courtney, thank you so much for having me today. Thank you to Rabbi Mack and certainly to the other panelists. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. And honestly, there's no place I'd rather be than right here talking about why we should all vote yes on question 3 on March 2nd. So your first question is, what's in the bond? This bond is not unique. Rhode Island has passed 3 housing bonds prior to the bond that's currently on our ballot on November 2nd. But this bond is unique in that it's the largest housing bond that we've had to date. By voting yes on question 3 to approve $65 million in housing and community opportunity bonds for construction and rehabilitation of affordable homes and apartments throughout Rhode Island, you'll help communities revitalize neighborhoods through redevelopment. You will create new construction and new construction jobs, mind you, as well as property acquisition. This small investment will leverage millions in additional resources while creating much needed housing, construction jobs, and stronger communities. The first 3 bonds, I'll just say from 2006, 2012, and 2016, they created 3,200 new homes and apartments across the state of Rhode Island. The Building Homes Rhode Island program is truly invested in almost every city and town in the state of Rhode Island. Prior to 2006, most of the affordable housing construction happened in the city of Providence, almost 80% of it. Prior to 2006, almost 80% of the bond investments have happened outside the city of Providence. So what we're talking about is a reinvestment in local cities and towns, in the rural and urban communities, as well as the suburban communities. So quite frankly, why not vote yes on question 3 on November 2nd? Why is it important to Rhode Island? All 3 bonds prior to 2021 totaled $125 million. They've been expended. Every dollar has already been committed and is either in project or in process or totally complete. So the projects to date are visible. They're available for you to see. You can visit Rhode Island Housing's website or Housing Works Rhode Island, their website, or Homes Rhode Island. And any of those 3 sites will have access to links for all the projects that have been developed. And we're also happy to provide that information for you. Lastly, I'll say, just thinking about the notion of long-term affordable housing in Rhode Island and what that means, we know that folks are transitioning. My parents 2 years ago, they sold their family home of over 40 years and transitioned or downsized to a more manageable space. They no longer had children and grandchildren and others who needed to stay with them. So they were trying to make it easy on themselves. And we know that Rhode Island's largest and fastest growing demographic is our senior population. As I look to the audience here and I see friends like Jill Toback and others who have helped us do this work for so long, I think about the times that we spoke of the housing bonds in the past and the uncertainty that we had about whether or not they truly come to fruition. And I can say without a doubt, having produced over 3,200 new homes and apartments, whether they are first-time homeowners or long-time homeowners, and creating over 4,000 jobs in Rhode Island, good paying jobs that provide adequate salary, paid time off, health benefits, retirement plans, the type of jobs that you would want your children to have. That's why we're asking you to vote yes on question 3. Build homes, build jobs, and invest in Rhode Island.
Thank you, Kyle. Awesome. And I think it's important to note, and we'll go into more detail during Q&A, but housing is in a crisis here in the state of Rhode Island. And while the critical importance of the $65 million, I also think it's just important to note that we are like tens of thousands of units short here in the state of Rhode Island. Every dollar matters in all three of these bonds, but I'm a little partial to housing because of the great work that we do every day at United Way. Last but certainly not least, and I will call her EBB, it's because I love her to pieces, but Elizabeth Burke-Bryant, who's the Executive Director of Rhode Island Kids Count. It is a children's policy and advocacy organization that provides information on child well-being, stimulates dialogue on children's issues, promotes accountability and action with a core focus on equity. Rhode Island Kids Count provides policymakers, community leaders, the media with the best available data and information on children's health, education, safety, and economic security. In fact, when I was interviewing for this job at United Way, the very first place I went was Rhode Island Kids Count, because everybody was telling me that is the place you go for the latest and greatest data and the trustworthy data at that. Which is the fact book. The fact book is the go-to resource for many of us who are in this sector, really tracking 71 different indicators around child health and well-being and really elevating disparities by race, ethnicity, and income. Elizabeth has been in this role since it started in 1994. So we are so grateful to have Elizabeth here. She is going to share with us and talk about question number 5, which is child care and child care education facilities, an important and critical role, and also an area where we have access and gaps here in the state of Rhode Island. So EBB, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Courtney, and it's great to be with my fellow panelists and also to have this wonderful forum hosted by Temple Beth El, the Jewish Alliance of Rhode Island, and the Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty, which I have worked with since its inception. Is just a wonderful, wonderful coalition, and I know Temple Beth El has been a proud member of it. We are so excited we're excited about every question here. Rhode Island Kids Count has been a very strong supporter of affordable housing, and we are so excited about question 3. And President Sanchez, question 1 is so important for our state's future. So I'm so glad that all of us are together on the panel. But when you see your ballot, whether you're voting absentee or you're voting in person on March 2nd, you'll see that question 5 is the Early Childhood Care and Education Capital Fund, $15 million for early learning facilities. Why do we need it? Well, early learning centers have really suffered from not enough maintenance and not enough investment. And so this really important bond will both create new facilities for the many families out there that are looking for great early learning and childcare spaces for their kids. It will also serve to improve tired old facilities where we don't want any of our kids to be. It's an equity issue. We absolutely need to be sure that there are high quality early learning facilities across the state for all our kids. We know that 90% of brain development happens in the first 3 years, and that the preschool years are really so important to school readiness and to making sure kids have school success later in school. It's the foundation of everything. So this is one that I think we should all skip to the polling place and happily vote as big a yes as we can, because it's about the future of our state. We know that now during the pandemic, there have been just exacerbated disparities exposed. The pandemic has hit communities of color the hardest, our Latino and Black families and communities of color, marginalized communities, and childcare has seen the same thing happen. We have seen so many people in need of childcare that can't find high quality facilities for their kids. And in particular, infant toddler childcare, which is really a tragedy. There was a study by the Local Initiative Support Corporation about childcare availability for different ages. And it found that in more than 24 Rhode Island communities, there was demand for 3 infant toddler slots for every one available. So this bond will also be a real shot in the arm, no pun intended, for getting real investment into our early learning facilities, which have been forgotten and left behind for too long. We think that early childhood education, we all agree, is really where it all begins, that parents need support and the confidence of knowing that their children are in high quality early learning programs across the state. And when people say, you know, does space really matter? Think about your own kids. Think about the excitement you get when you actually find an environment for your child that looks like it really, really emphasizes wonderful learning and growth. We want that for all of our kids. And voting yes on question 5 will provide $15 million critical dollars in investment for physical improvements to early learning facilities across the state. So tell everybody, tell your cousins, tell your cousins' cousins to vote on all of these great bond issues. And thanks for having me as part of the panel, Courtney.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And so I will encourage folks to put questions in the chat. And I see one coming in the meantime while folks are entering in their questions. Frank, question for you. I think one of the things that folks may not realize is how important infrastructure is to the competitiveness in higher ed, to enrollment, to admissions. One of the things as a trustee at the University of Rhode Island, I know is that I see first and foremost, the very first thing folks are seeing on a tour is one of the oldest buildings we have, which is the Fine Arts Building. And so, and you know, we also know that higher ed is highly competitive right now because of enrollment changes, the pandemic, all of that. So share a little bit about what this means for you as you're thinking about the growth of RIC.
No, it's a great question, Courtney. You know, a lot of these bonds, I think a lot of the voters assume, well, this is to renovate the individual buildings. Well, that's true, but it's really about modernizing the facilities. You know, the design of our Clark Science Building, I mean, it was built in, 58 years ago. We're not going to just refurbish it and keep it the same. We're completely redesigning and modernizing it with the latest technology, infrastructure to meet the demands of tomorrow's degrees, and so that Rhode Islanders, again, can get back to work. So all of the funding in higher ed is really to keep our institutions competitive, modern and competitive, because you're absolutely right, Courtney. All over the country, higher education institutions are investing, and every state invests a little bit differently in their higher education institutions. One of the real strengths, and I've been here about 5 years, but I got to tell you, one of the real strengths Rhode Island has is that they do, at least historically, support bonds for higher education. And that's why you see the tremendous renovations happening at URI, now Rhode Island College, and CCRI as well. But it helps us stay competitive, and it helps us, certainly attract new students, both within the state, but beyond the borders of the state as well.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll just mention that I think is important for folks that may not know is that the portion to which of RIC's budget, URI's budget, and others is allocated from the state is much lower than you might think. And so that doesn't leave room for capital improvements to this nature. Now, some of that is done through fundraising, some of that is done through bonds, most of the time done through a combo of the two, all of which are incredibly necessary. And so wanted to note that. The first time I saw the budget and looked at the number of the percentage that we actually got through appropriations of the state, I was blown away how low that was, nearly single digits, by the way. So it's significant. So Kyle, share a little bit about, I mentioned a little bit about the housing crisis and where we are as a state. You know, I think COVID has done nothing but exacerbate it, right? And really elevate where we are as a community in housing. But will you share a little bit about the state of housing in Rhode Island?
Yes, Courtney, thank you. The argument you just made for investing in higher ed is exactly the argument we'd make for investment in affordable housing. Within our New England states, we are the lowest state in terms of investment per capita in affordable housing construction and housing construction in general. Our neighbors to the north and south of us, Connecticut and Massachusetts, they invest somewhere between $98 and $103 per person in housing construction. The state of Rhode Island, we invest somewhere around $8 to $9. So if you think about that type of investment, just to be competitive with our neighbors, we're lagging behind significantly. But then secondly, and probably more importantly, Rhode Island has the oldest housing stock in the nation. The oldest housing stock in the nation. The majority of our homes are over 80 years old. So you know that that comes with all types of contaminants, whether it's lead, asbestos, or anything else that we use, including lead paint, to make our homes beautiful and exuberant in all of their prominence years ago. But today we know that we have to renovate them. So similar to the buildings at Rhode Island College and URI and CCRI, we've got to renovate our homes. And this bond, this housing bond, provides critical infrastructure investment to make sure that our homes are safe, that they're healthy, and that we can continue to build affordable housing. And lastly, I'll say the program itself, it's run under the guidance of the Housing Resources Commission. It's a board that's created by the state. It has several members from the community, such as myself, that sit on it, but also every state department director or administrator, because housing, similar to education, as EBB mentioned earlier, housing and education, they go hand in hand. They are the center of a good life and a decent life. And when home is unstable or unsafe, everything else around the world and around and in and out of your life is unsafe and unstable. And I think about folks who've been asked to shelter in place during the pandemic, folks who have been asked to learn from home during the pandemic, and folks who have been asked to work from home during the pandemic. When you do not have a home, it's impossible to do those three things.
Yeah, I often say you should never assume that a child who doesn't have a safe place to lay their head every night can focus in a classroom.
Absolutely.
Never. They can't. It's unattainable. Imagine if you can't be your best at your job if you are, couch surfing, as an example, which happens for more Rhode Islanders than one may think. EBB, there's a question for you from Karen Eisenberg. She's confused a little bit on number 5. Is that money for any childcare facility? So can a privately run daycare business apply for the funds or improve? Is it money for like Head Start, universal preschool? Can you provide a little bit more context?
Sure, it's money for a variety of early learning programs. Childcare programs can apply for this money. And there are many programs that have childcare and Head Start in the same building. So it is going to be for an early childhood facilities fund that will be administered by the Department of Human Services, and it will be a range of grants for, as I said, plans for new facilities, plans to upgrade existing facilities. And so it is for improvements to childcare programs, which are in a variety of community spaces across the state. Because of really underinvestment in the earliest years for so long, all of us know the kind of catch as catch can space accommodations that some of the very best, most loving providers have to deal with every day, whether it's some sort of a cobbled together space. That's not where we want our kids. We want our kids in early learning environments that promote their learning and growth. And so this will really be an investment in our childcare providers who for too long have had to make do and really have wanted to improve their facilities. We are ahead of the game in Rhode Island because we already have, before this bond existed, an early childhood facilities fund that has been led by the Local Initiative Support Corporation with lots of fantastic before and after pictures of what an early learning facility looks like or a childcare facility looks like, and then what happens when there's really smart investment in making that space better. So we have a track record similar to what we've seen that Kyle has mentioned in the housing journey here in Rhode Island about what a difference these capital improvements can make. So we have a track record to build on. This 15 million is really, really needed money to be able to do more. And we're also by supporting question 5, you're supporting working families and you're supporting our youngest learners. So it's a great investment.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. So question for the three of you from Elaine Sandy, hi Elaine, is talking about adjusting plans due to the ramifications of the pandemic. Has that, as you guys are thinking about these three bonds, how has the pandemic switched or, allowed or required for any pivoting as you're thinking about this particular area? And I'll actually ask, Frank to provide some context first.
Sure. No, that's another great question, Courtney. For us, we see this bond as an opportunity, and specifically, I'll speak to Rhode Island College and the $38 million. We have the opportunity to be responsive to the business community. I've heard every year I've been in Rhode Island, the chambers of commerce and business leaders have said, we want to see more degrees in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And when I think about the COVID now, we have to continue to drive now these degrees more now than ever to help our economy recover. And so for us, this is a great opportunity to be responsive to the business community. I mean, the Department of Labor, they had a statistic not long ago where they said that they estimate that STEM degrees and STEM related jobs is growing among the fastest among all occupations of the state, about a 13% growth rate from 2014 to 2024. That's compared to about 7.8% of all other occupations. And so we have an opportunity with the RIC portion of the bond to enhance the quality of the type of STEM degrees that we produced in the past and really prepare Rhode Islanders for the future. And at the same time, create an attractive option for Rhode Islanders to get back to work and to receive the type of training, type of degrees, type of certifications to get back into the economy.
Thank you so much. Kyle, any thoughts on how, and I know there's lots of thoughts on how housing has changed as a result of COVID?
Yeah, since most folks that I'm aware of have moved to a work from home environment, we're no longer simply saying that it's important to have a safe, affordable, and healthy home. We're also thinking it's important to be green as well. So thinking about the energy consumption that folks have used over the last year while they've been home, whether it's heat during the winter season or air conditioning in the summer, should they have access to it, we know that part of building new means building green and really utilizing tax credits available through the state and other programs that help to create solar opportunity as well as wind opportunity for families is incredibly useful moving forward. And also thinking about the type of insulation that's provided in your home to make sure that as you cool the house, you keep the cool air inside and that the airflow is conducive to reduced and lowered energy consumption and ultimately expense. So that's just one avenue, but it's been part of our work for a long time, but it really has been highlighted over the last year due to COVID and the significant increase in utility expenses that folks are experiencing.
Great, thank you. And Elizabeth, one of the things that I think about with COVID and the pandemic is, we've seen a lot of change amongst childcare facilities here in the state. So share a little bit about the impact that childcare facilities have seen.
Well, great question. Initially, during the beginning of the pandemic, childcare facilities were closed for a period of time for the safety of early childhood educators and the children. Fortunately, there was a really, really great plan by our state agencies, the health department, DHS, to reopen childcare safely. And so they have been reopened. They have had the same kinds of difficulties you can imagine, where if staff get sick, they have to close for a period of time and then reopen. They have been real heroes on the front lines. I just want to point out that, there are many of us who are fortunate to be able to work from home. There are many, many, many people in our state that don't have that privilege. And they need every day to feel like they have a high quality place for their children to be in a great early learning environment. And the demand for childcare is really high in the state, and we need to support our Rhode Island economy by supporting childcare and early learning. So the pandemic, I think, has certainly made everybody appreciate childcare very much, because they know that it's very, very difficult to balance work and childcare and do everything to the degree people want to do it well. I just wanted, Karen, one more point you had asked about, I checked out the chat, universal pre-K. about 2/3 of our Rhode Island pre-K seats are in community-based programs. We have what we call a mixed delivery program system in our state for pre-K, where it's not all in public schools, just about 1/3 of those classrooms are in public schools. So by investing in question 5, you're also investing in high quality environments for our pre-K program to be offered. And thanks, Karen, for asking that question.
That's a great question. Frank?
Courtney, yeah, I would just add, with question number 1, these bonds also provide our higher education institutions with the type of technology, to your point about COVID. All of our institutions of higher education are having to adapt to provide more hybrid, online, distance learning opportunities. But I'll be honest with you, at Rhode Island College, even post-pandemic, we want to provide broad access points for Rhode Islanders so that you're not required, or you don't have to travel into North Providence to get a high quality degree. We want to, this bond is going to provide technology and Clark Science so that we can deliver that distance and online and live streaming technology that's really going to be needed as a big part of our future at the institution.
Yeah, I think the idea of just classroom-based learning is not going to be a thing. I really think that evolution is here and has come, right? And to the other point on housing, folks have to have a place to learn, right? And safe and stable place to learn. So that's the importance of that. Go ahead. Yeah,
if I could add just a second to piggyback on President Sanchez's comment, in addition to access, we also have to think about broadband. For folks who are working from home that have a very limited broadband, a narrow bandwidth, it's difficult to navigate a platform such as this, a Zoom platform. And for children who are using these platforms for educational purposes, it's difficult for them to not only get connected, but to stay connected. They find that their calls may drop, or that they may have a disconnect between the audio and the video in their sync. It just doesn't sync. So broadband access has become increasingly more important, as it has for the last 20 years, but it's paramount now and has been highlighted through the pandemic.
Yeah, I love the fact that One Neighborhood Builders has been so focused on really building a broadband web within the Olneyville neighborhood and in Central Providence. I'd love to see more of those happening. This gentleman that I supposedly am in the same home as, David Nicolato, I hear he's gorgeous, asked a question specifically around what's the plan, like how soon will we see the benefits of these bonds? So EBB, I'll start with you. How soon will we start to see these dollars in action? And you're on mute, sorry.
My understanding is it is a fairly quick turnaround. Kyle will know more from the housing bond turnaround, but I think that the point of this, as was the case for the school construction bond last year, is that there is an urgent demand out there for these dollars. They always have to be very, very careful that they're administered with the utmost care so that our voters have real confidence in fair processes and a really good oversight. But it's a fairly quick turnaround. I think Kyle can tell us a little bit more based on the experience with the housing bonds.
Yeah, I'll share just quickly with the housing bonds. The turnaround is almost immediate. In fact, the Housing Resource Commission is meeting next week to put together the final plan on how the bonds can be allocated. So the first thing that we look at are projects that are shovel ready. If you have a proposal to submit to the state and your project is shovel ready and the bond funding could be the last piece of the puzzle, that moves you to the top of the list in terms of prioritized applicants. The second thing that we look at is to ensure that we're meeting classifications of homeowners and renters that are traditionally underserved, veterans, seniors, those who are disabled, in other ways abled. Really making sure that we're building homes that meet or fill the gaps from community to community in terms of the needs of our population. And then lastly, really being prepared to deliver a project that's complete, making sure that it's not only on time, but that the project is truly complete and able to be brought to fruition in no time. So for the housing bond, what typically happens is once the bond has been passed, within 60 days, the state will float the bonds and the funding will become available. So again, those shovel-ready projects will begin to be submitted in March. All of the The rubrics for evaluation will be created shortly after the bond passes on March 2nd. And then hopefully by this summer, the projects will be underway.
And Frank, I think you guys are already like designing and planning in hopes that this does get approved, right?
Absolutely. You know, we have to follow all the state procurement kind of guidelines and regulations. It does take just a bit longer. Historically, at Rhode Island College, it's been between 18 to 24 months, but you're absolutely right. We're doing some of the due diligence beforehand. So once it's approved, we can move quickly to begin the construction as soon thereafter.
Great, thank you. And thank you guys for your time and sharing of your information and sharing of these important bond questions. One of the things that I wanted to do before I pass it back to Rabbi Mack was share a little bit about how to vote. This is a special election. So a couple of things. One, I received my ballot yesterday. I applied to receive a mail ballot. I filled it out and it's back out heading to the Secretary of State's office. And so the deadline was today at 4 o'clock. So if you did not fill out your application for mail ballot, unfortunately, you are an hour and 46 minutes too late. But when you do receive your mail ballot, you will receive your mail ballot, a certificate envelope, instructions, postage paid return envelope, and the, of course, ever important I voted sticker that you proudly wear. Please do allow 7 days for the Board of Elections to receive and process your ballot. So know that weather is playing a factor right now. Know that the mail system is a little slower than normal. Also, there are drop-off locations throughout the state, which I'll share a bit about in a second as well. If you are voting in person on March 2nd, a couple of things to note. Bring a valid photo ID. You will receive your ballot once you've shown that to the clerk who is working at the poll. Mark your ballot accordingly, obviously fill in all the holes, all the circles, and proceed to the voting machine and your vote will be counted. I have to say that the Secretary of State's website, vote.sos.ri.gov, sorry, I didn't put the correct there, but we'll put it in the chat. Kyle, if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat for me, that'd be great. The site is super, super easy and very intuitive. And so you can check your voting record there. You can check your local polling place. There's also early voting happening between now and March 2nd, which is great and really convenient. You can, if you do have a mail ballot, you can track the ballot to make sure that it does in fact get to the Board of Elections. If you did vote in the presidential primary in November, the process is pretty comparable, if not exactly comparable. It took me all of 30 seconds to vote today in my slippers in the comfort of my own home. So very easy to do, very easy to complete. We are abundantly grateful for the opportunity to share insights with you about this special election. My ask of each and every one of you who are on is to tell your friends. Folks may not realize how important this special election is. Because there are no elections with elected officials on the ballot, it will be harder to get folks in the beginning of March to a polling place. So we do ask you and really encourage you to share with your friends what you learned today, the importance of them being at that polling place on March 2nd. So thank you so much, and I will turn it over now to Rabbi Mack.
Courtney, thank you, and thank you to all of our panelists, Kyle, Elizabeth, and Frank. We're really grateful for your time this evening and grateful to be able to inform the public and support these measures. I will encourage everyone to share. This is up on Facebook, another way to share and to make sure, as Courtney said, to get out and vote I also want to call out our partner organizations. I know Stephanie Haig is with us, as well as David Valise. I want to thank them for being here and to let you know that they are important faith partners as we continue this work in other spheres. So there are other legislative issues coming up with regard to affordable housing and childcare and poverty, and we encourage you to stay in touch so that we can work together to build a better Rhode Island. So thank you to everyone. We're really grateful that you could join us today and get out there and vote, either in your pajamas from home or in person in March. So, thank you, everyone.